Kingdom Hearts and speedrunning are two words that are commonly not thought of together. They share a fascinating history with one another which has brought many iconic moments to this incredible game. Today I'll be delving into Kingdom Hearts Final Mix's history, piecing together what made the game what it is today, and who were the innovators that brought the game to levels never before seen. This is Kingdom Hearts Final Mix's world record history video. Most people know the basic premise of Kingdom Hearts, but to summarize quickly, it's an action JRPG made by Squaresoft, aka Square Enix, which is a universe where both Final Fantasy and Disney properties coexist in the same space. The game was a massive success for a new series, selling over 450,000 copies in North America on its opening week in November of 2002. But the question you may be asking is, where did it all start? To be able to answer that question, we have to take a journey back a long way, precisely 3 months after the release of the Japanese port in 2002. In 2016, Timmy Loves discovered a Kingdom Hearts 1 speedrun on an old Japanese speedrun site known as Ultima Garden.
So I ended up looking into the site and I found a run, the run that she was talking about. It was still listed as the world record on Ultima Garden. It was a run by a Japanese player that, when we translated the name, was Sirius.
The legitimacy of this run can always be thrown into question since this run is only recorded in text form. However, the information Sirius has provided about this run is honestly mind-blowing and years ahead of its time. Starting off with the basics, the speedrun is done in the time attack format, meaning he did this run in segments with the objective being to get the lowest in-game time by the final save. So this run does not technically complete the whole game, but only misses around 10% being the final fights.
And the run was 5 hours and 36 minutes at the final save point in final rest. So if you extrapolate about 17 to 20 minutes for final fights, it was probably still sub 6, even with final fights included. But it was about 90 minutes faster than what we in America at the time were kind of thinking the gold standard was.
At the beginning of the game, you have the choice of 3 weapons where the selection you make sets your stats and abilities growth based on that playstyle. Sirius decides on choosing Sword and sacrificing Shield since he wants to perform as much damage as possible and is now bothered by defense. Moments later, you end up on a platform in Destiny Islands with 3 Final Fantasy characters asking you a set of odd questions which you have to select an answer for. Funnily enough, this sequence determines how your EXP route will go. By choosing the top options, you get Dawn, which levels you quicker in the early levels. The middle option, Noon, is balanced. And lastly, the bottom option, Night Route, levels you up quicker in the later levels. Sirius chooses the Dawn route, which is still the most optimal route today for 1J, as you want the improved stats sooner rather than later. When you arrive in Traverse Town, the game advises you to explore around the world where Donald and Goofy would unintentionally be following you around. Most players will explore the world, finding chests, defeating Heartless to improve their level. However, Sirius ran straight to the second district, killed 5 Heartless, which is the minimum requirement to progress through the story, and then returned to the accessory shop in the first district to trigger the Leon fight. I honestly had no clue about this requirement until 2013, and to think Sirius had already figured such a major time save, avoiding all those cutscenes and areas 3 months after its release is crazy.
In the write-up, Sirius documented that Hook's ship appearing after completing 2 of those 3 middle-level worlds was about 70%, and the use of 70% was significant because it wasn't until probably 2014, 2015, if not even 2016, that Bloody Biscuits and Ahirin together ran a large number of tests and concluded that it was about a 70% chance to appear. We never really knew before that, but again, 16 years prior to that, Sirius knew 70% chance for it to appear. 5 Shadows in Traverse Town. There was just a lot of really deep knowledge about the game that was just kind of shocking for someone to have after it had only been out for 3 months when they performed the run.
This is where the real meat of the history begins, as this is the earliest single segment full game run I could find of KHFM. There were runners playing the original port on English, similar to this time, but I want to keep the run focused purely on the Final Mix port. A he run is an icon in the Kingdom Hearts speedrun scene, mainly known for his discoveries of tech in Kingdom Hearts 2, and also becoming the world's best player a few years later. On the 31st of July in 2012, a he run streamed a Proud Mode speedrun on his Nico Nico channel, where he would aim to complete the entire game as fast as possible. It is quite common to see Japanese runners playing on the harder difficulty modes, with only one Japanese runner ever playing on beginner mode 8 years later. The reason why the run is so long is due to the fact that all PS2 ports of KH1 do not have skippable cutscenes and consume several hours of the total time. After completing a world, the player is required to fly to the next desired location in a rocket ship known as the Gummy Ship. These Gummy missions take a total of 14 minutes to complete. This would normally take longer, however the speedrun is routed to prioritize speed over defense. A he run edits his Gummy in a very unique and slow way by removing 17 armor pieces from his Gummy to reduce weight, which increases the speed of the Gummy. After arriving in Agrabah, a he run proceeds to skip the first bandit fight, which some don't know is optional. He then goes to the desert to save Aladdin and uses Simba to help clear the waves. This strategy is used for several years. After returning from the desert, a he run does a trick known as Bandit Skip. Essentially, Bandit Skip is a trick where we examine the keyhole and unlock the required door without needing to fight the bandits. Skipping further ahead to Halloween Town, there is another trick that applies the same metric known as Tomb Skip. This trick skips fighting 2 white knights on top of the tomb before examining. After completing mid-game, a he run decides to do his third and final Gummy edit, which has him add Flare G, acquired from Neverland, which increases the Gummy speed. Similar to the last Gummy menu, a he run adds another 6 purple armor pieces and 3 green armor pieces to increase his HP even more, which continues to slow down the speed of the Gummy. I don't really feel it's necessary to cover many other points in this run, since this run is done on Proud Mode and has a different approach in terms of routing and how to do boss fights. Regardless of some of the mishaps that happened, this run is very commendable and historic for being the first speedrun of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. Whilst editing the video together, Dessa discovered a run on YouTube which was uploaded on August 13th of 2008 by a user who goes by the name Daniel Albuquerque. Within this video is the first chapter of a segmented run of the Final Mix port, which technically means this is the first speedrun of Final Mix done on video. With this run being segmented, this does not compare to a he run speedrun, as Daniel had the chance to possibly retry segments to execute to a more preferred liking. However, when calculating all the segments together and removing load times from the load game screen, the run roughly comes in just shy of 6 hours and 54 minutes. On the 14th of March 2013, Square Enix released Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 Remix, which is a remaster collection of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, RE Chain of Memories, and a cinematic telling of Kingdom Hearts 358/2 Days. This remaster has improved graphics, a remastered soundtrack, improved camera controls, and lastly this game has skippable cutscenes, excluding 2, which are the opening cutscene and Hollow Bastion keyhole cutscene. With speedrunning on a rapid surge of growth and popularity, this game released at a key moment for many nostalgic gamers who wanted to get competitive with their favourite JRPG. Teal Game Master was the first person to attempt running this game in a single segment, achieving a low 4-hour time 10 days after its release. After a few hours of Teal Game Master achieving a massive improvement on his first run, bringing the world record down by almost 20 minutes, a new competitor would arrive and absolutely smash the current world record by almost another additional 20 minutes, and his name is Tojimaru. Tojimaru was a well-credited runner of the PS2 English port, with several runs under his belt. He was able to apply his knowledge from the PS2 port over to the new HD remaster, which allowed him to push the time down by such a significant margin. Toji decides on choosing sword and sacrificing staff, having his priority be on strength and defense. He also decides on Dawn route to get more experience early on. This run is the debutante of the now famous Toji Hop, which is a trick discovered by Toji himself, saving several seconds on movement by jumping up to a higher platform on Destiny Islands using a Keyblade swing. After defeating guard armor, Toji does his second menu in the game, which is equipping EXP Necklace for Brave Warrior. This will increase Sora's strength, however he makes the mistake of not re-equipping EXP Necklace on one of the party members, which will reduce the experience he gains throughout the game. Similar to a he run, Toji was not aware you can highlight the whole Gummy and delete the ship, then add back in the cockpit and engine. So instead he proceeds to remove the majority of the armor pieces to reduce weight and increase speed. This method is still much faster than the default Gummy which TGM uses. When Toji arrives at Deep Jungle, he takes a different approach in terms of movement. Rather than going through the Jungle Slider minigame, which ends you at the camp, he decides to traverse through the bamboo thicket instead, which is slower. However, runners may not know about quitting out of Jungle Slider at this point in time. In terms of combat, ground combos are the priority, with some blizzards used in Power Wilds. After completing early game, Toji heads to Leon in the secret waterway and traverses through the alleyway rather than the hotel, which saves 5 seconds on movement. Toji sells Pretty Stone and Ribbon to acquire over 1000 money for Haste G. When arriving at Halloween Town, Toji grabs a specific ledge in the Guillotine Square and opens a hidden chest which contains a power-up, which will speed up the remaining fights as his strength has now increased. In Oogie Boogie, the fight starts with 2 gargoyles required to be defeated before the next phase starts. After doing so, the buttons on the floor will light up, which dictates which platform will rise to reach Oogie. You need to be careful and make sure you select the right platform. If missed, you will have to survive a counterattack from Oogie or defeat an additional wave of Heartless. If you successfully select the right button, you can do a maximum of 10 hits on Oogie Boogie. However, all hits landed will count, which includes party members, and they do substantially less damage than Sora due to the buff stats he has at this point in the game. Sadly, this information was not known by Toji at this point. Speaking quickly on endgame, it was good to see Toji knew about defeating only one wave in High Gates, which allowed him to save time by exiting and re-entering the area, which tricks the game to believe you have cleared all waves. Toji plays it safe on Dragonmail and summons Tinkerbell for safety, as a consistent strategy did not exist for Dragonmail at this point. Toji died on Behemoth 1, which did cost him a bit of time since he had to redo this fight, and unfortunately this is all I can talk about with this run, as the VOD does not work beyond Hollow Bastion 2. This run is such a big improvement on Till Game Master's run, providing us with smarter routing and better execution throughout the whole game. 4 days have passed and Toji is continuing his speedrun journey of KHFM. The same metrics apply in early game, just like the previous run. However, he decides to menu the exchange EXP necklace from Sora onto Donald. This increases his experience gain throughout the run whenever Donald is in the party, resulting in better stats and abilities earlier on in the game. In terms of gummy routing, the same approach is applied to this run. He removes armor pieces individually, only buys Haste G, and skips Flare G and Haste 2G in Neverland and Hollow Bastion. The main improvements to speak about is Toji's overall execution of early game, saving over 2 minutes due to better movement and execution in fights. His mid-game is a little lackluster, losing a lot of time to Jafar, LSV, and opposite armor. His endgame overall goes better than his previous run, saving time on his last run by avoiding a death at Behemoth, and also executing the beginning of End of the World much better, which put him almost 6 minutes ahead of his PB. However, in final fights, Toji lost over 3.5 minutes due to a death on Anthem 1 and poor execution on Anthem 2, leaving this run with much more to be desired. Before getting into the next run, as Saiyanz was scriptwriting this video, he heard Sonic, Takafy, and Chrono ask Toji if the world record was a 1 minute and 50 second faster than his time, which he semi-confirmed was true. Saiyanz tried listening out for as much of the video as he could for any hints at who might be. Saiyanz checked everywhere he could for a video or tweet regarding the PB, but unfortunately couldn't find anything to do with this run.
April 1st, 2013, Till Game Master quote got world record, and Toji Maru on April 2nd got 325. I've found a highlight from Till Game Master from April 11th. And it says Toji Maru 325, so it all correlates.
Like really, the biggest drama to
and he has, oh my god, we found it. He has a 328.01.
After completing his last world record, Toji claimed he could save an additional 5 minutes on his current PB, which he perfectly pulled off. How did he do it? Well, starting off, Toji optimized his early game even more than last time by executing Destiny Islands over 30 seconds faster. He also finally menus the gummy ship in the most efficient way by highlighting all items, deleting them, then adding the cockpit and engine, saving him over 30 seconds. We also see Toji adding Fire G into his route. Unfortunately, the VOD does not work around this point, but I assume Toji figured out selling everything excluding the Elixir and White Fang, which would produce enough money to be able to purchase both Fire G and Haste G, saving over a minute throughout the run. When facing Jafar, Toji finally acquires a decent result, saving 54 seconds, putting him over 2 minutes ahead by the end of Agrabah. After Monstro, we see a slight incline in the pace, losing over a minute between Monstro and Neverland. Afterwards, the run turns into a bit of a rollercoaster ride, getting close to 2 minutes ahead after Opposite Armor, and then down to 1 minute ahead after Dragon Maleficent. Toji kicks it into high gear near the end of the run, saving more and more time, avenging his death at Anthem 1, and entering the final fight close to 7 minutes ahead of his PB. During the final fight, Toji does not keep a good enough check on his health, and dies to Final Anthem, losing over a minute and falling just short of his goal of sub 325. Whilst the rivalry between Toji and TGM was going ahead, a runner who would in future cement himself as one of the greatest runners of the Kingdom Hearts franchise surprises everyone by taking over KH 1.5, and his name was Cyberman65. Cyberman is a well-known YouTuber who specializes in playthroughs with well-executed gameplay as his emphasis. He has been involved in the speedrun scene for a few months, mainly running the PS2 ports of KH1, and would later go on to dominate many games within the series. Cyber came out swinging, starting the run with a 20-second lead over Toji after Destiny Islands. He would continue this trend throughout the remainder of early game, creating a 30-second lead by the end of Deep Jungle. The main differences seen here is the execution and approach behind some of his fights, providing more consistency and optimization, a minor example being in the Claydon fight, where Cyber loops Claydon with half air combos compared to Toji's full ground combos that knocks the enemy away and is slower animation as well. After arriving in Traverse Town 2, it becomes apparent that Cyber has made a major mistake by not equipping EXP Necklace onto the other party members. When it came time to sell all the items to Sid, he indeed sold the EXP Necklace, which meant he had a deduction of EXP growth throughout the whole run, which would lose him time. Another thing to note is that Cyber decides to navigate through the hotels when meeting with Leon and loses him 5 seconds compared to alleyway movement. Arriving at mid-game, we already see a signature play which only Cyber would attempt for years, which was skipping the first bandit encounter and going for the frame-perfect examine on the keyhole, which can save 5+ seconds. Sadly, in this attempt, Cyber fails the trick, losing around 10 seconds. In the Bazaar Room, Cyber encounters the Black Fungus, which, to quickly explain, is a rare Heartless spawn which takes more time to defeat than the regular enemy encounter you would normally get. The way to fix this issue is by re-entering the room, which costs 6 seconds due to loads. The issue here is that Cyber decides to fight the Black Fungus before realizing it was too slow to do so. Deciding to follow on with the re-enter strategy would lose him a significant amount of time. Due to the VOD being old, most of the mid-game cannot be viewed, so sadly this is all I can comment on. In the endgame, Cyber improves on Toji's run with better execution in Hollow Bastion 1, and a smart gummy route choice, buying Faraga G and traversing the late game gummies quicker than Toji. Cyber would make a drastic mistake in the gummy mission of Hollow Bastion 2 by not quitting out at a specific loading zone where the game unlocks Hollow Bastion to be warped to, losing roughly 40 seconds, which would have been more time lost if he did not have Faraga G equipped. Cyber would clutch out the rest of the run with overall decent fights, saving over a minute in the World of Chaos, but would lose time to Toji even without a death due to slower execution and also summoning Tinkerbell for safety. This world record is certainly eye-opening in terms of what Cyber would eventually be capable of doing to the game, showcasing his experience with more optimal combat. Sadly, some of the routing decisions came to bite him, being much more underleveled than Toji by the end of the game, and missing out on time save by doing opposite armor at the wrong point in the game, as well as not quitting out of the HB2 gummy earlier. Either later that same night or earlier the following day, Cyber would try again at improving his time, clearly correcting on some previous mistakes made and saving close to 3 minutes. This run was unfortunately not archived, so I cannot go into detail on this run and what specifically Cyber did to improve on his last run. To keep on the train of back-to-back world records, Cyberman would come out swinging yet again, bringing the world record time down by an additional 4 minutes, which unfortunately cannot speak much on due to Twitch having a horrible issue with older VODs, and only an hour of footage was able to be viewed. Do not worry, however, as this is the last run with this issue. During that 1 hour, most of what I saw from Cyber's earlier run did apply here, except his skill set with the game improved due to finishing another run prior, which is increasing his experience with the game. The only major mistake I noticed was in Behemoth 1 segment, where Cyber had issues with clearing the wave of Heartless that spawn in the high gates of Hollow Bastion, costing him over a minute. During the credits, the VOD would fix itself and I was able to get a snapshot of his run, noticing he saved 3.5 minutes in the final world. Since his last run was not archived, I can only imagine Cyber executed End of the World poorly, and was now able to capitalize on previous mistakes, securing a massive improvement. A month has passed and Cyber is continuing his dominance of KHFM, seeking to bring his time closer and closer to the sub 310 mark. During this run, Cyber had improved on his previous route, leaving through TT1 at the world exit door rather than the accessory shop, saving over 10 seconds due to faster movement and skipping 2 loading zones. He would however still have odd routing decisions, specifically in Traverse Town. I noticed in his second visit, he strangely goes to the diner area and uses Blizzard to freeze all the lanterns to unlock the chest, which would give him a defense up, which is used right away. I also noticed Cyber switched off EXP Necklace right after Guard Armor, and never bothered to equip it again, even though he avoided selling it in Traverse Town 2. And lastly, Cyber still decides on fighting opposite armor early, which we discussed before will lose him time due to being a lower level. After bleeding some minor time in Agrabah, Cyber produces 40 seconds of time save between both of the Jafars, clearly capitalizing on previous errors made. He would add to his collection of time save, producing close to a minute and a half saved on the lock, shock and barrel split alone. I wish I could go into detail why exactly this happened, but without the previous VOD, it's hard to explain why. The rest of the run would pan out at the same sort of pace, losing time in a few places and then recovering the lost time to others. His final fights went well, saving 35 to final rest and 41 to Ansem 2. He would then lose a minute and 5 seconds due to taking a very defensive approach in Ansem 3, flying away and waiting for Ansem to stop his laser and sword attacks, wasting a lot of time waiting around for an opening. With a 2-minute improvement, it seemed like Cyber's execution was showing true dominance in the competitive standings of the game. However, routing still played a decent downside for Cyber, still not making the adjustments to his route to secure further time save in the game. Following on from his previous run, Cyber would make some adjustments to his route to secure another world record, lowering his time down an additional minute. The main differences Cyber made was skipping the lanterns in District 1 of Traverse Town and fighting opposite armor later in the game, which should have saved him a decent amount of time, but due to getting bad luck with the Requiems near the bell tower, he ended up only saving a few seconds overall. To speak on some additional route improvements, Cyber finally leaves the EXP necklace alone and does not unequip or sell it. Cyber skips grabbing the additional defense up chest in Treasure Room, saving a few seconds in movement and menuing. After defeating opposite armor, Cyber skips grabbing the power up in Neverland, saving 33 seconds on his PB, and lastly, Cyber discovers the quit out method in the HP2 Gummy, saving him 20 more seconds on his previous run. Now that general routing is out of the way, I will also speak on in-game routing Cyber did, which improved his run. We see Cyber switch out Goofy for Jack, which at this point would be more beneficial due to the additional spells Jack could cast on Heartless Waves. Cyber would continue this trend in Hollow Bastion 2, switching out Goofy for Beast, which isn't the best choice, since Goofy should have MP Gift by this point in the game, which is one of the most utilized abilities in Endgame. To quickly explain, MP Gift is an ability of Goofy's which allows him to gift 3 MP to a party member while sacrificing 2 MP of his own. This ability would prove to be very useful down the stretch, since we utilize Ars Arcanum a lot in final fights, which would make fights overall faster. When entering the OC portal in End of the World, Cyber switches his equipment around for more MP and summons Simba, hoping to clear all 3 waves with Simba. Unfortunately, on his first stun roar, he lets go of Triangle too late, allowing the defender to get close enough to interfere with Sora, missing out on the chance to save more time. He would not return to using this strat for 2 months, which is interesting since the strategy overall saves 10 seconds and is more consistent. I lastly want to touch on the fact that Cyber took advantage of the blue menu you get after Behemoth, which allows him to equip a cottage to restore all HP and MP stats, and as well switch his equipment to buff his MP stats for use of Simba, a strategy discovered by Sonic Shadow Silver 2 a week prior on the original PS2 port. After defeating the second Heartless Wave, Cyber would summon Simba, allowing him to change Simba's Roar to max, defeating every enemy that spawns in each wave. Due to lack of MP, Cyber could not clear the last wave and had to defeat the Heartless manually. This strategy would overall save 6 seconds compared to the previous Tinkerbell combo method. We also see better item usage from Cyber in final fights, which would help him save minor time in World of Chaos, and whilst also skipping Tinkerbell in Final Anthem, saving an additional 13 seconds. Now that we have all the routing stuff out of the way, we will speak on the execution side of the run. Cyber ends up saving 30 seconds in early game, and also an additional 30 in Agrabah and Halloween Town. Cyber would unfortunately mishook ship once, costing him 50 seconds. We would later in the run see Cyber accidentally dodge roll off the edge of Hollow Bastion, costing him a minute and 8 seconds. We would see the birth of what would become a fan favourite strat within the community, seeing Cyber implement Stop on Dragon Maleficent for the first time, making it easier to land additional combos on her before her sporadic movement would insist. This strategy would further develop throughout the years and save additional time. We also see a new strategy implemented in Behemoth 2 and 3, utilizing gravities at the start of the fights. Since Archbehemoth is classified as a Heartless and not as a boss, the gravity damage scales based on how much health the enemy has remaining, allowing you to deal tremendous damage at the start. The reason why this does not work on boss fights is the same, is due to the game applying specific damage caps, which does not allow certain actions to succeed a specific amount of damage. I will use the second Ansem fight as my example. No matter if I have 43 strength in a regular speedrun, or 80 strength on a level 100 file, the damage dealt is going to be the exact same. The reason this is implemented is to help balance the game and avoid players from excessively grinding for a higher level to cheese all boss fights in the game. Some of this logic was not heavily considered in the speedrun until years later. His next mistake would come at Chernobog, losing him 1 minute and 35 seconds due to a death at Chernobog's wall. He would return swinging at Ansem 2, saving 20 seconds due to better execution, and also saves 1 minute and 24 seconds at Ansem 3 due to fighting Ansem more aggressively. With a solid world of chaos, Cyber was on pace to get a 312, even with all the mistakes made. After a singular DM in the Invisible fight, and skipping Tinkerbell on final Ansem, Cyber would finish his run with an overall improvement of 1 minute and 9 seconds. This run shows massive potential of what Cyber could now do with the new tweaks to his route and strategies in fights. He would be capable of getting a run below 310, however needed to work on his execution in some fights, and hopefully achieve a deathless run. Following on from the last run, Cyber would aim to correct his previous mistakes and hopefully achieve a sub 310, which he unfortunately falls 18 seconds short of. Let's go over what happened. Cyber would end up saving even more time on his early game, pursuing to further optimize his play in the first act. His Agrabah was very mixed, with some good segments like Pot Centipede and Genie Jafar, and some bad ones like Jafar 1. Cyber continues on his trend of skipping the power-up chest in Halloween Town, which he also decided to do on his last run as well, which ends up being a poor route decision. The reason why Guillotine's square power-up is worth it when Big Ben's is not, is due to time loss in loading screens. Cyber would end up spawning Black Fungus. He also had poor movement and executed fights costing him 35 seconds. However, Cyber would return fire, saving time on both Oogie fights. After missing Hook's ship again, Cyber had missed out on a massive portion of his potential time save, now hoping to play well and finish the run deathless. Cyber would implement a strategy change at the pre-Hook fight, opting to not summon Simba and fight all the waves manually. This would end up being a good decision with the current meta, as he lacks enough MP to properly kill all the waves with Simba, saving him over 15 seconds. Heading into the end game, Cyber starts off well, saving 20 seconds to Riku 1 and an additional 25 to Maleficent 1. During the Dragon Maleficent fight, Cyber would improve upon his new strategy of using Stop by skipping the summon of Tinkerbell, both saving time on the summoning animation and saving MP for more stops, which allowed Cyber to defeat the boss quicker. Cyber would have a very good Hollow Bastion too, saving an additional 30 seconds due to a better executed Lift fight and Behemoth fight. His End of the World would be very shaky. He decides against using the Simba strat this time, which is slower. However, this would not affect the run since his last PB failed to execute the Simba strat correctly. He would also go Deathless in Chernobog without using Tinkerbell, saving an overall time of 53 seconds. Cyber would change his strategy in Final Rest, opting to summon Simba right at the start of the fight, which would prove to be crucial as he wasted an entire Simba roar since Dark Balls can disappear for periods of time, making them immune to Simba's roar. Also, by not fighting the first wave, he would have to deal with an additional wave at the end of the fight, which is far more difficult due to the enemies that spawn. These mistakes would overall cost him 1 minute and 30 seconds. When all hope was lost for sub 310, Cyber kicks it up a notch on Ansem 3, doing an excellent job of taking Ansem's attacks, which allows him to attack more efficiently and rely on healing a lot less. This would put his pace at 2 minutes and 51 seconds ahead. If he could keep up with his last run, he would pull it off. The luck would sadly run out as Cyber had a very slow World of Chaos due to poor execution on both Artillery and the Invisible Core, falling 17 seconds short of the goal. On the 6th of June 2013, Cyber would achieve the first ever sub 310 speedrun of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. Cyber would come out strong, saving 52 seconds in his early game, an additional 20 in Agrabah even with a 3-cycle Jafar 1, and lastly, a bonus 15 seconds in Parasite Cage 2. By the halfway mark, Cyber was already 1.5 minutes ahead, looking to clear his goal of sub 310 with ease. He would finally get Hook's ship on the first try, saving back 50 seconds now, putting him 2.5 minutes ahead. Dragon Maleficent would be Cyber's first detriment, losing 32 seconds due to returning to an older strategy of using Tinkerbell, which loses a lot of time due to the summoning animation and also having less MP for the fight. Cyber would recover the time loss at Final Rest, learning from his previous mistakes and correcting himself by summoning Simba after defeating the second wave of Heartless. He would finally snag an additional 20 seconds of time save in the World of Chaos face split due to better execution at artillery. This run finally showcases Cyber's ability with the game, taking away any unfortunate luck and awkward strategy in boss fights. With this in mind, could the time now go any lower? This question would not take too long to answer, with Cyber improving his time in usual fashion by 2 minutes. In terms of routing, the run would play out similar to all of his other runs, mostly refining his execution in boss and Heartless encounters. The only route change I noticed is Cyber swapping EXP Necklace for Amiga Arts and moving EXP Necklace to Goofy, which would provide better stats for Sora going into End of the World. The improvements compared to his PB are Pot Centipede, Oogie 1 and 2, Dragon Maleficent, Behemoth, and lastly Anthems 2 and 4. But the more important detail to note is most other segments in the game all went really well, saving Cyber smaller chunks of time somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 seconds. When putting these segments into perspective, you can start to see how Cyber improved by such a large amount. Cyber would take a few weeks off Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, returning on the 11th of July hoping to de-rust and pick up where he left off. But no one really expected a back-to-back world record from Cyber right after a few weeks off the game. His early game started out very poorly, losing over 40 seconds. He would not recover this time loss until Halloween Town, where he successfully got 2 cycle on Oogie 1, with the inclusion of Dice Reflect saving 15 seconds. After getting Hook's ship first try, Cyber would complete Neverland in excellent fashion, saving 29 seconds. He would tie his opposite armor to the second, however decided to edit his gummy after TT3 rather than Neverland, causing the discrepancy in the splits. Cyber would continue to improve at his new stop strategy on Dragon Maleficent, saving 6 seconds on his last run. Even with the missed blitz on Riku 2, which caused a DM, Cyber would end up saving 14 seconds. His End of the World goes very smoothly, clearing Heartless with relative ease, only having a minor amount of DMs from Invisibles. This would save him a combined time of 40 seconds. Before entering through the final door, Cyber refines his items to better suit final fights. A new strat would be implemented on the heart of the World of Chaos. Cyber would apply the same metric from Behemoth 2 over to the heart, doing several gravities before committing to combos, saving him 7 seconds on his PB and securing sub 304. A month and a half would pass and Cyber's world record was still undefeated. Cyber would return to Kingdom Hearts Final Mix Beginner, aiming to get his time closer to the ever-desiring sub 3 hours. His run started out strong, gaining a nice time save at Leon by implementing half air combos in the fight, as the damage between a finisher and a regular hit was not much different. Therefore, it would benefit Cyber to do half combos on Leon to prevent knockback and Leon retaliating as much. After completing early game and returning back to Traverse Town, Cyber would replicate the same mistake he made last run, selling his White Fang for money. Maybe White Fang wasn't well routed at this point, but the equipment is very crucial in the beginner run, making fights quicker when equipped, compared to other equipment on offer in the mid game. By the halfway mark, Cyber would lose a 26-second lead on his current PB, and look to be on promising pace. During LSB, he would luckily spawn White Mushrooms, which at this point in time was better for the runner as you didn't have to fight the 5 White Knights and 4 ghosts that spawn in the room. This spawn would save Cyber 13 seconds. After watching Cyber's LSB, I am convinced it is one of the luckiest and fastest fights I've ever seen, clocking in at 9 seconds exactly. What is more amazing is Cyber does this fight without any use of magic. The 3 kids stayed very close together when Sora was attacking, allowing the finisher to hit all 3 kids and evenly distribute damage. A fight of this magnitude was not at all common at this time, until magic was developed into the fight, which allowed for better consistency and optimizing. Continuing on his flow of amazing execution, Cyber would have a very fast anti-Sora fight, looping anti-Sora consistently with 5 total hits, allowing for maximum damage per cycle. He would also go on to have a very good bell tower and opposite armor fight, saving an additional 18 seconds, now putting him 1 minute and 47 seconds ahead of his PB going into the endgame. With a mostly smooth Hollow Bastion 1 and 2, Cyber entered the final world 2 minutes ahead of his PB, looking like he might possibly sub 303 and 302. The potential would meet its demise in the OC portal, where Cyber would revert back to Simba strats since it was faster. The air soldiers approached Sora much faster than normal, which made getting a 3-tick Simba roar impossible. At first glance, it may seem like Cyber did nothing wrong. However, looking back carefully at the fight, I believe due to him making a subtle movement backwards before summoning it triggered the AI to approach more suddenly, ruining the fight. After taking a death in OC portal, Cyber would successfully pull off the Simba strat, but would lose over a minute due to his misfortune. The momentum would continue with a very mediocre final rest, failing to clear the second wave very efficiently. After defeating Ansem 1, it would seem uncertain whether Cyber could pull the run back and still achieve a sub 303. But in the next segment, something amazing happened, which would become a massive talking piece in the later years of speedrunning Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. After successfully defeating Darkseid 3 with a quick kill, it was time for Ansem 2. Cyber starts the fight out as per normal, comboing between the Guardian being in front and behind, keeping a nice loop going. As Cyber comes closer to clearing Ansem's orange bar of health, something abstract happens. He flinches Ansem from behind, which caused him to retaliate with a backward slide and charge. But as this action happened, Cyber flinched Ansem 3 more times. Without realizing, Cyber would continue comboing Ansem and land his combo in the perfect time window to gain an additional flinch on Ansem, which would prevent him from retaliating with his desperation move, and instead with a regular attack. Since Cyber did not use any Ars Arcanums at the beginning of the fight, he was able to quickly dish out enough damage in time to prevent reaching the next retaliation of Ansem's, and defeating him without any DM, which would be the first ever DM skip of Ansem 2 in a world record run. This strat would not develop into something consistent for a few years, and was always just considered a very lucky and coincidental thing to happen for a runner, which had the potential of saving the runner a tremendous amount of time. The momentum would continue onto Ansem 3, improving on his last run's mistakes and saving back another 20 seconds. After defeating the World of Chaos face, Cyber would finally pull off his first DM-less Invisibles fight on a world record run, saving another 11 seconds and achieving a 3:03:02, putting him 3 seconds shy of sub 3:02. When looking back at the additional 1:06 Cyber lost to OC Portal, it clearly shows that sub 3 is becoming more of a reality. But would Cyber be the one to pull off this amazing feat on his next attempt? 3 days after the release of the English port of Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Remix, Cyber would try once again to achieve the impossible and make history by achieving the first ever sub 3 time. This run would fall just 2 seconds short of the goal, crushing the hearts of many who were so eager to see this goal achieved. This run is sadly lost to time. The run was uploaded to YouTube and was possible to view for a few years. However, the video has spontaneously become unavailable to watch. I have given this info to Cyber himself, who has quoted he cannot find this video on his account anymore, so it must have been deleted or removed due to copyright. It's very sad to see one of the most iconic runs be lost to time, but I at least have a description of the video to read back to you. I'm really happy on how this run went, but I just missed the sub 3 hours mark by 2 seconds. Had some close calls in this as well. Some bosses could have went a little better, like Clayton, Lock, Shock and Barrel, and Riku too. But I can't complain about that since I got white mushrooms in Halloween Town, no black fungus, and having Hook's ship show up on the first run. Hopefully I will get under 3 hours. From this run I can save 2 to 3 more minutes at most, unless a new strat or big skip is found.
It's really vague to me. I don't remember too much of it anymore.
Of course it's very hard to speak on this run since Saiyanz has not rewatched it in 7 years, but it's truly incredible how close Cyber got to the infamous sub 3, and the fact that he believes he could save an additional 3 minutes is insane to consider. He truly showed to have the most potential, but would he be the person to make history? On November 3rd of 2013, we would have the answer to that question. But the answer came as a shock to the community, as this player was an underdog at the time, not known for his speedrunning achievements in Kingdom Hearts. And his name was Mistmaster 1. Mist would make history, achieving the first ever sub 3 hour time with a 2:59:49. And what's more intriguing is that this is the first world record to be achieved on the English version of the game. and will also be the final world record using this route. To quickly cover off some points, the English port released on the 12th of September and brought with it some changes to the Japanese port. The controls were swapped to the original English port from the PS2, which was cross for attack and circle for jump. The text was also timed to be roughly a minute slower than the Japanese port, as well as some other small time saves which would be noticed on this port that I'll explain later in the video. The first thing that's noticed is that Myst chooses the night route instead of the dawn route, which allows for quicker level ups when at higher levels. By choosing night route, you actually finish the game at a higher level than dawn. The next bit of value to know is a route change in Deep Jungle. After defeating Sabor, Myst would jump off the treehouse and land in the jungle slider area. He would then enter the minigame and exit out, which would spawn him at the tent. This movement saves 7 seconds over Cyber's route. After completing a very efficient early game, Myst would sell every item in his stock to Sid, excluding White Fang and the elixir, which is a wise routing move, giving him over 1250 money, allowing him to purchase the Fire G and Haste G. When arriving in Agrabah, Myst decides to fight the bandits and unlock the keyhole right away, which prevents the need of executing Bandit Skip, which is a frame-perfect trick that Cyber never got in his world record run. After saving Aladdin, Myst would alter the menu done previously by Cyber. He would equip White Fang over EXP Necklace, giving Sora more damage, and would give EXP Necklace to Goofy, as he will be in the party throughout the entirety of the game, still reaping the benefits of the EXP boost. Myst would also unequip Jackpot and equip Critical Plus on Aladdin, which would help with later fights, increasing Aladdin's chances of critting attacks. The next improvement to showcase is in the Pot Centipede fight. After defeating Pot Centipede, Myst would scurry to the plaza. Why would this matter, you might ask? Well, Square developed the game to have different cutscene triggers based on what room you're in after completing the fight. The room transitions are turned off during the Pot Centipede fight, so you're actually able to access an area closer to the desert, which saves 8 seconds in movement and loads. The rest of Myst's Agrabah would not go so well, getting a 3-cycle Jafar 1 as well as losing 15 seconds to Jafar 2. The reason he lost so much time to Jafar 2 was moving at the start of the fight, causing Genie Jafar to hide away in the lava. In doing this, his hitbox is no longer active, meaning no extra blizzard damage can be dealt. It also affects Iago's position, making it more awkward and difficult to output damage efficiently. The next route improvement I was able to find was in Halloween Town. Myst would grab the power-up in the Guillotine Square, which was something Cyber last grabbed in his 3:13:58 run. Although, Myst spends extra time grabbing the chest and equipping the power-up. Myst would go on to have some overall mediocre heartless encounters, and would unfortunately spawn Black Fungus, losing him some more time. After failing Dice Reflect on Oogie, Myst was starting to lose a lot of time to his earlier lead. However, Myst had an excellent Oogie mana, saving 31 seconds on his last PB, due to his last run falling off the mana twice. After completing Halloween Town, Myst would menu some more growth abilities to Sora and his party members, which would become a more common menu runners would start doing. Myst successfully got Hook's ship on the first attempt, putting him on pace to achieve a sub 301, being 1 minute ahead after Anti-Sora. His run would continue to progress, staying with the same pace as his PB, not losing any major time. He would see his next big time save in Dragon Mail. Myst would use several MP items throughout the fight to replenish MP, so he could cast more stops on Dragon Maleficent, allowing him to have less issues throughout the fight. Myst would go on to save an additional 15 seconds in Riku 2, executing the fight quite smoothly with only one DM happening right at the end. When Sora turns into a shadow, Myst makes a route mistake heading to the front door to the high tower, losing him 7 seconds. What would later become Myst's signature playstyle, he continues to dominate his late game, saving 17 seconds on Behemoth 1 and 12 on Behemoth 2. It's also worth noting Myst was lucky enough to get the Amiga Arts drop after defeating Arch Behemoth. This item has a 10% chance of spawning and was considered a good item to have at your disposal, as it increases your HP, strength and defense by 1. Chernobog lost Myst time due to an invisible DMing and a bad pattern from Chernobog. After defeating Behemoth 3, Myst would also equip Oathkeeper and Ray of Light as Cyber did. However, due to choosing Night Route at the start of the run, Myst was a higher level by this point, unlocking an additional MP increase, allowing him to summon Simba after the second wave, and would have enough charge to defeat every other wave in the fight. This would roughly save Myst an additional 30 seconds over Dawn Route's final rest. At this point, it became a sudden realization that Mist was on pace to achieve a sub 3 hour time. All he had to do was keep up with his previous run and not lose more than 17 seconds. After defeating both Ansem 1 and 2, this run became a real nail-biter, losing 14 seconds over the last 3 segments, making the cutoff for sub 3 very thin. Mist went on a tear, having very smooth World of Chaos fights, leaving the scariest fight left to decide it all. Mist would unfortunately have an invisible DM, losing him some time and putting questions around if the sub 3 had died then and there. At this point, Mist was on edge, taking anxious breaths, hoping that this would be the moment he would make history. This run was phenomenal. To have a runner who only has 5 weeks of experience running the game, going all the way from 3.5 hours to the first ever sub 3 is something that cannot be ignored. This was a massive feat to achieve, breaking the barrier open for a new champion to rest on top of the throne.
Yes! Yes! You, Ansem! Yes! Yes! Oh my god! Yes! Whoa, oh my god! Yes!
After achieving an amazing feat, Mist would take some time off KHFM and return to his origin speed game, Majora's Mask, aiming to improve his 100% time. On December 15th, 2013, Faye, formerly known as Silvergoo, would reveal a new route which became the sole route used for this category for the remaining years to come, known as Staff Route. Sword Route was always the common route choice when it came to KH1 Original, FM on PS2, and the HD port, due to its increase in strength. However, it was noticed that the abilities unlocked in the first 50 levels for staff benefited the speedrun in a much improved way. Abilities such as Leaf Bracer and Air Combo Plus would prove to be valuable abilities in the endgame, and would make the game a lot easier to complete deathless. Also, as spoken before, there are damage caps that exist throughout the game, so the additional strength from choosing Sword would not heavily benefit in boss battles. However, MP would be shown as a more valuable tool to the runner, since more MP meant more Ars Arcanums, more stop spells, and also better spell strength, meaning Heartless encounters had the potential to be quicker and more consistent. Cyber would return from his hiatus and showcase the new route, beating Mist's time by 39 seconds. This being Cyber's first run with this new route is of course not the smoothest. Cyber would start doing jungle slider movement in Deep Jungle. Due to the additional MP, Cyber would save 16 seconds over Mist on Power Wilds. Continuing the trend of saving time, Cyber would warp to Wonderland before flying to Agrabah, saving another additional 8 seconds. And finally, Cyber would also not sell White Fang and equip it to his slots in Agrabah, helping him with future Heartless encounters. Cyber would save 8 seconds on Mist, successfully getting the Bandit skip for the first time in a world record run. After defeating Pot Centipede, Cyber ended up in Palace Gates, which meant he was 2 loading screens away from where he needed to be, losing 16 seconds. His Jafar 1 and 2 however went much smoother than world records, saving over 30 seconds. Keeping on track with route corrections, Cyber would grab the power up in Halloween Town after many months of ignoring it. With the additional MP at hand, Cyber would have a much easier time getting through Heartless waves, having more MP at his disposal. He would be fortunate enough to spawn the white mushrooms, which would save him 9 seconds, but unfortunately spawned black fungus as well, losing 10, and also lost 10 more seconds to a movement error on the way to LSB. At the start of Oogie 1, we see Cyber stand still at the beginning of the fight, which manipulates the AI to move closer to Sora. This makes it easier to defeat the 2 gargoyles at the start. Cyber would also get Dice Reflect, making this a very fast fight. After discovering Hook Ship on the first try, Cyber entered the last 2 worlds of mid-game with good results. His Neverland was fine, with a good anti-Sora and a slightly bad hook. Traverse Town 3 would prove to be an issue for Cyber. When Cyber missed the guard at the start of the fight, he allowed opposite armor to move away, causing time to pass before he had another window to get off a good amount of attacks. Cyber would get the slowest possible ending to the fight as well, waiting 13 seconds for opposite armor to have no iframes. To quickly explain what iframes are, they stand for instability frames, which is a common feature developers put in RPGs to allow a boss to animate or do a specific sequence in the fight without being interrupted by the player. There are ways of avoiding iframe sequences, but require very specific execution a lot of the time. Besides the hiccup in the gummy edit, there is only one thing I really want to touch on in Holy Bastion, since the world mostly goes to the usual speed. In Riku 2, Cyber would pull off the first ever DM skip on Riku 2. The way the DM skip works is you attack Riku and aim to get his health to the second last bar of HP, where he will charge up his Dark Aura phase. After he charges up, Riku will commonly retaliate with an attack. By guarding then teching the attack, you open up the window for a counter attack. After a maximum of 4 flinch hits, Riku will retaliate with a counter spin move. During this move, you want to move away and prepare to retaliate in a very small and specific window. By keeping this continuing loop, you are able to defeat Riku without a desperation move, which costs roughly 10 seconds. This strat is normally done using ground combos as it's easier to land and requires less execution. However, Cyber does the DM skip using air combos, which was really ahead of its time, not being commonly used in the fight until many months later. Entering the final world, Cyber starts off strong, executing a DM-less Invisibles fight, which today is one of the hardest fights to pull off efficiently. Not long after, Invisibles would DM in the laboratory fight, losing back some of the time saved earlier on. During Chernobog, Cyber was able to skip a phase in the fight by reaching a HP barrier at a fast enough speed, but sadly he missed out on the quick kill at the end. During Final Rest, we would see Cyber switch out Raven's Claw for Ray of Light and keep Divine Rose on, which would allow him to have 9 MP, which would be enough to use Simba Strat for all the waves excluding the first 2. By having Divine Rose on, Cyber had a much easier time clearing Heartless. After closely missing out on Ansem 2 DM skip, Cyber went into World of Chaos playing his usual way, getting to low health and trying to output as much damage as possible before healing. Even with a rough World of Chaos, Cyber was able to secure the DM-less Invisibles core, which secured him his final world record in his speedrun career for KHFM, with a 2:59.10. Cyber has cemented a legacy which deserves its recognition. Pushing the game from 3.5 hours all the way down to the sub 3 hour mark is extraordinary. He dominated the game without any close competition for 8 months straight and improved the world record time down a total of 12 times. Cyber would only improve his time once more, finishing off with a 2:58.47 in January of 2014, which was second place at the time. Misfit returned from his hiatus, determined and eager to see what he could do with the new staff route. On January 17, 2014, Mist would improve on Cyber's time by an additional 45 seconds. Most of this came to overall better execution, with the route being better developed and tested over the last few weeks. In terms of execution, his run is like a roller coaster, very up and down in many places. His pace was looking solid after completing Monstro, however fell off a lot at Halloween Town. He would recover in Neverland, but then lose his momentum to Travis Town 3 and Hollow Bastion 1. His final 2 worlds were very good, having minimal execution errors excluding Ansem 1 and Darkside 3. He would secure sub 2:59 and his spot at the top after losing it 3 weeks prior. After resecuring world record, Mist would return a few days later to improve on his time. We see starting off, Mist saves 20 seconds throughout the entirety of early game due to better combat. The start and mid game would be very up and down for Mist, not being able to hold an increased lead on his PB. However, Halloween Town would be the change of pace, seeing an 18-second time save on Oogie 1 without pulling off Dice Reflect. Hollow Bastion 1 would prove to be the best world of this run, with Mist going on a tear, getting 3 back-to-back golds on Maleficent, Dragon Maleficent, and Riku 2. Maleficent had better movement and faster Heartless fights. In Dragon Maleficent, Mist would use the Mega Elixir, which is acquired from a Blue Trinity at the end of the lift ride, which allowed him to defeat Dragon Maleficent before she could DM. And lastly, Riku 2 would have a rough start, but would be Mist's first time getting a DM skip in a world record run. By the time Mist reached the final world of the run, he was teetering on the possibility of sub 2:57, but needed some better upcoming segments to clear his goal. His Behemoth 2 would go to an average pace, having a singular invisible DM. In the Chernobog segment, things would take a turn for the worse, as Mist entered the Halloween Town portal accidentally, losing 8 seconds, and would also leave the lab portal accidentally when landing from an air combo, costing him an additional 6 seconds. After losing 22 seconds throughout the entire Chernobog segment, Mist would need to have stable final fights and Ansem 2 DM skip to secure sub 2:57. Starting with Final Rest, Mist would clear the Invisibles very efficiently, having much of the enemy stay bunched together, getting multi-hits with his combos. This best segment would save Mist 13 seconds. Ansem 1 would be a successful segment for Mist, doing an amazing job at controlling Ansem's movement at the top of the beach, where he could be wedged against the ledge and the stadium barrier. This allows for more efficient damage output. Ansem 2 would be a big deciding factor on sub 2:57's reality. Mist would fortunately flinch Ansem at the precise time to open the window for a DM skip to happen. With stable damage output and a scary submission at the end, Mist would successfully DM skip Ansem 2, having an incredible start to final fights. His World of Chaos went very well, clearing through artillery in the core rooms at good pace. The only red flag spotted was the Invisible Core, where Mist only did 2 gravities and did not rely on Goofy's MP gift. Due to how slow this game loads, commonly Ars Arcanum can take a period of time to load into fights, and unfortunately it did happen here. Even with the mistake in the Invisible Core, Mist only lost 3 seconds to his PB and would successfully clutch sub 2:57, quoting he was done with beginner mode any %.
That is a solid time. I am done with this category.
On the 9th of February, Miss and Mysora decided to do a beginner mode any percent race just for fun, with no real intention of Miss aiming to get a world record, considering he hasn't played the game for 3 weeks. But lo and behold, Miss would miraculously improve his time by 6 seconds. The only new development showcased in this run is a new strategy used on the face fight, where the player landed on the face and uses R's Arcanum, which was a very high risk and low reward strategy at the time. During the research of the world record history video, I discovered this tweet from Miss which shows he got a 2:56.20 roughly a week after his last PB. The following day, Miss would try again at improving his time, hoping to remove the 1 minute 30 second mistake that happened at the end of his last run. The early game started off poorly, falling 30 seconds behind his PB due to rougher execution on fights. His acrobat went smoothly, avoiding black fungus spawn and defeating Pot Centipede in the correct room. This run would have a world's first where Miss was able to die in the carpet escape segment, which instead of resetting the segment, takes you to the cutscene which triggers after escaping the cave, saving 8 seconds. This method was used in harder difficulties, but was always theorized to not be possible in beginner due to the buff defense stats. Miss LSB would also be another solid segment for him, getting the best spawns possible, with the white mushrooms in Graveyard and no black fungus in Moonlight Hill. Hookship was acquired on the first try, and Miss would also have a smooth Neverland, saving 15 seconds on his PB. Miss went into opposite armor with potential of breaking ahead of his PB, since he had 30 seconds to save in the segment. Sadly, he would miss out on half the time saved, due to missing the quick kill at the end of the fight. Hollow Bastion proved to be a rollercoaster of a world, starting off with the best segment on Riku 1 saving 9 seconds, then 12 seconds lost to Maleficent, and lastly recovered 22 seconds to Riku 2, getting a DM-less fight, which I presume did not happen on the last run. Miss Hollow Bastion 2 went incredible, achieving a ridiculous best segment which was unrivaled for a very long time. He was now 31 seconds ahead of his PB entering the final world. Miss started off strong, getting DM-less invisibles. After a smooth Angel Stars, Miss was able to keep up with his excellent segment in his PB and hold his 30-second lead. His amazing execution would continue in Chernobog, getting a very fast and DM-less lab fight, which gave him issues in his last run. With another best segment down, Miss was now over a minute ahead. Miss performed a segment which was arguably as good as his Behemoth 1, beating his best segment by 12 seconds, now putting him over a minute and a half ahead. After successfully quick killing Darkside 3, he was now clawing closer to 2 minutes ahead. He would miss out on DM-less Ansem 2, but entered World of Chaos still ahead by 1 minute and 42 seconds. Miss completed the rest of the run in standard fashion, only showing some rough results on the face fight. This run was an amazing improvement for Miss, and a great showcase of how amazing his ability is to clutch a run out when the pressure is on. With this amazing run complete, Miss was still not satisfied to leave it there, as he was already 40 seconds behind his PB in the first hour of the run, showing clear signs he had improvements left in him to go. During a race with his soon-to-be arch-rival Biscuit047, Miss would improve his time down by an additional 19 seconds. Miss started this run much better than last time, recovering some of the time he had lost in the last run, finishing early game 25 seconds ahead. Miss was projecting to have his best ever Agrabah, but fell short in the final fight, where Iago was able to slip away from Sora's reach due to a whiffed hit at the end of the fight, losing Miss 20 seconds. He would return fire on the next segment, achieving a best split on Parasite Cage 1, saving back 7 seconds. Even without White Mushroom spawn, Miss was able to best segment his LSB by a few milliseconds, and kept up the momentum successfully, getting Dice Reflect and 2-cycle on Oogie 1, now putting him 47 seconds ahead of his PB. During the Oogie fight, Biz makes a very peculiar claim that he was able to skip the ghost from spawning in the second graveyard fight, which would eventually become a strat we will still use today. I will cover this strat when it becomes relevant in a later world record. In opposite armor, Miss would reclaim the extra time save he had missed out on in his last run, saving an extra 14 seconds, which now put him 54 seconds ahead of his PB. He had a great start to his endgame, getting an amazing Riku 1 split. He would replicate this execution in the following Riku fight, where he best segmented after pulling off a DM-less fight with air combos to go with it. After this point, his run would take a bit of a nosedive. Due to playing so well in his last run, it would be hard to maintain a similar speed, progressively losing time the deeper he goes into endgame. Although he missed out on Ansem 2 DM skip, Miss would finish this run with an 18-second improvement, saving 50% of the time that was lost on the last run to early game, which was the main dilemma with the last run. Biscuit047 would join the KHFM scene, with his eyes set on becoming the best player in the world. Throughout his speedrun career, he has had great success with JRPG speedruns, being a former world record holder of Final Fantasy VIII, Kingdom Hearts 2 English, and Final Mix. On April 3rd, 2014, Biz would start a run hoping to close the gap between himself and world record. To quickly skim past the early game, Biz was entering mid-game 5 seconds ahead of his PB and 22 seconds behind Myst. It would not take Biz very long to overtake Myst, where Biz would achieve the first ever 1 cycle in Jafar 1. How exactly Biz achieved this was by adjusting the way you do the beginning of the fight. Instead of dodging his laser, then comboing him into the center, instead you do half an air combo to a blizzard. By doing this, Jafar's AI will retaliate by summoning his bubble, which allows you to get additional hits off during his flee. There is a small window where you have the chance to stun Jafar whilst in his bubble. If you successfully stun him at the right time, he will stay on the platform where he started, you are able to get the hits off quick enough to kill him before he disappears. Following Jafar one cycle, Biz would get the quick kill on Genie Jafar, which saved him 21 seconds and put him ahead of Mist by 8. The last thing to add about this amazing Agrabah is that Biz successfully dies in the carpet escape, but dies a fire pillar earlier than what Mist does. This is the first time someone has died this early in a world record run, and it would save him an additional 2 seconds on Mist. The rest of his mid-game went decently, with his standout segments being Oogie 1, Opposite Armor, and Hook, with a new strategy being implemented in the pre-hook fight, which uses Simba to clear the first 2 waves of the fight instead of manually attempting to attack the enemies, helping Biz save 16 seconds. Entering endgame 17 seconds at a world record, Biz was on potential to create a ripple and dethrone one of the most dominant world record holders in KHFM's history. Starting off in his endgame was the Riku 1 segment, which would cost him 16 seconds to his PB, and tied him with Mist. Biz would claw back 17 seconds on Mist and Maleficent. Lastly, Biz would showcase the first run to have the magic menu utilised in Dragon Maleficent rather than a shortcutted stop, saving a menu earlier on in the run. Biz started off with a great Behemoth 2, successfully getting downless Invisibles. His final rest was very shaky, losing 14 seconds and dropping the lead on Mist to a 15 second deficit. Biz's Anthem 1 was also a little shaky, dropping his lead on Mist down to now 7 seconds. Biz would miss out on Anthem 2 DM skip, but save time back on Mist with a faster overall fight, making the lead 13 seconds. Biz showcased a unique strategy which was short-lived, shooting blizzards at the start of the Dark Ball fight to trigger the enemies to retaliate and come closer to Sora earlier on. This strategy would prove to be very inconsistent compared to later discovered methods. Biz would take the safer route in the phase fight, opting to combo and dodge lasers, which cost him 3 seconds to Mist. Biz would successfully get downless on the Invisible Core and go on to secure his first ever world record in KHFM Beginner, achieving the first ever 253 and also being the second person to dethrone Mist, who had a clear dominance over the game for the last 4 months. This run is quite incredible. It's not very often a runner can bring his personal time down so far and also clutch out world record at the same time. It requires containing a lot of nerves, and I want to showcase how significant this world record was, as this created one of the greatest rivalries in Kingdom Hearts speedrunning history, which inspired many runners to get involved in the game today. With Biz now holding the top spot, Mist had his eyes set on returning to number 1 in the world, but knew that it would not be easy. What would then ensue as one of the greatest chapters in the game's history, where 2 amazing players would compete to further one-up each other, pushing the time down as their skills grew. But who would end up triumphant in this clash?
Oh my god!
Mist would finally complete the rally between himself and Biz, pulling off the final world record in this epic 3-month rivalry, which saw 8 world records between 2 amazing players, with this world record time brought down by almost 3 minutes. Before moving on, there are some quick things I want to mention about these set of world records. Starting off with Mist's 253.40, a change is made in the menu at Agrabah, where Sandstorm is now unequipped rather than Jackpot, which allows Aladdin to apply additional damage to enemies. Moving on to Miss 252-34, in Halloween Town, Miss would perform a specific jump in the Oogie Manor fight, which allows the player to skip rolling further ahead to a shorter platform to reach the next orb. Instead, by precisely jumping to the left side and grabbing onto the ledge, the first Miss jump was performed and would still be used today. During Biz's 252-07, one of the rarest glitches on the PS3 port would happen, where Biz would lose game audio in the Jafar fight, which would not return for the remaining parts of the run. The fact Biz was able to pull off a world record without game sound is incredible. Another interesting fact about this run is that Biz made history, being the first player to acquire every world record in the mainline categories of KHFM simultaneously, with only 2 other players performing the same feat later on. Next up in Miss 251-47, we see some route changes in Halloween Town, with Miss exchanging Jack's ethers onto Sora, and secondly the first ever graveyard skip was performed. To quickly explain, by defeating both the White Knights on the pillars, Sora is then able to platform onto each pillar, skipping the spawn trigger located on the floor, and moving straight to the casket with a blue menu. By skipping a total of 7 enemies spawning, this trick saves over 5 seconds. Another massive route change was implemented in this run, with the first ever community climb being performed, saving over 30 seconds. On May 14th, a user known as Kool-Aid would figure out it was possible to jump and land on the triangular roof to the right, which you could then jump onto a higher triangular ledge of the manor, which then gave you the appropriate height to clear the jump to the frame of the door. With a precise jump at the peak of the ledge, you could then grab onto a higher up platform and then another ledge straight after, which puts you halfway up the manor. After jumping the stair set, you can either take the safer route to the right and roll your way up, or proceed to jump and grab onto another higher up platform by going left, which saved even more time skipping additional movement. This discovery was such a nice buzz for the community. It was amazing to see the players get together and problem solve the best ways to save time with this new discovery, which removes the annoyance of the heartless wave at the door and the annoying elevator which wastes MP. This new route movement was a massive quality of life improvement to the speedrun, applying more movement tech into a very simplified run at this point in time. Before returning to KHFM, Biz successfully claimed every mainline category world record for Kingdom Hearts 2 English, which was the main active port of KH2 at the time. After completing his final any% world record on July 11th, 1 week later, Biz would complete his dream goal of acquiring every world record in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix and Kingdom Hearts 2 simultaneously, which was a feat that would never be replicated again by any other runner. After winning the world record battle, Miz decided to take a few months off KHFM to focus on other games, and would return to the game near the end of October, where he would then set his sights on sub 250. His first PB would come on October 20th with a 10-second improvement. Over 2 weeks later, Miz would further improve his time down an additional 6 seconds, securing the first ever sub 250, now with just 1 more minute to go. Unsatisfied with his minimal improvement from his last run, Miz came out strong, having an excellent early game. His endgame started off shaky, losing a decent chunk of time after a perfect Riku 1. He would recover an End of the World, saving good time back on Behemoth 2 and Chernobog. His Ansem 1 was amazing, creating a 38-second lead on his PB and a window of opportunity for Mr. sub 250, but he would require Ansem 2 DM skip to pull this off. He would unfortunately miss out on Ansem 2 DM skip and tied his PB segment, keeping the 30-second lead for the rest of the run. This would showcase to everyone how realistic sub 250 was for Miss. Even with a rough mid-game and Miss Ansem 2 DM skip, Miss was now only 20 seconds away from making history. After the completion of the first Kingdom Hearts speedrun marathon, Miss would continue on his journey for sub 250, hoping to secure his dream goal before the end of the year. His run started off well, keeping in close proximity with his PB throughout his early game, with a 13-second lead. Miss Agrabah went perfectly, securing close to a perfect segment on Pot Centipede, avoiding Black Fungus spawn, and having a wonderful save Aladdin and Pot Centipede fight. Miss would secure no time loss on Jafar 1, pulling off 1 cycle. His Ginny Jafar went well, getting the faster pattern with Iago and securing the quick kill. He was now out of the second hardest world in the run and on excellent pace, with the possibility to move further ahead now entering the roughest part of his PB. His Monstro went as well as it could, only missing on time save due to not getting the rare truffle spawn before Parasite Cage 2. Miss had big potential for time save in Halloween Town, but failed to capitalise due to poor Heartless fights, failing Tombstone skip and missing Dice Reflect on Oogie 1. He would lose a total of 50 seconds to his best segment in Halloween Town, but still held a lead worthy enough for the task. Miss was fortunate enough to acquire Hook Ship on the first try and securing a shot for world record. His Anti-Sora went well, only losing the loop twice, which cost him 7 seconds. His Hook also had a similar result, cruising along at an acceptable pace, but sadly missing out on more time save due to some poor execution. After defeating opposite armor, Miss would now finish mid-game 25 seconds ahead of his PB, which still left him on pace to make history. But the next few worlds would be the most nerve-wracking for Mist, due to the spike in difficulty. His endgame started off poorly, with one of the most brutal Riku 1 fights I've ever seen. Mist struggled to dictate the fight and was left chasing Riku down for damage, costing him 20 seconds. He was able to recover his time lost in Maleficent, pulling off a fast lift fight and clearing the Heartless and High Towers efficiently. Mist would finish Hollow Bastion 2 with a 20-second lead over his PB, leaving still a vague window open for sub 250, but would it be enough? The first and arguably most difficult fight went perfectly, preventing all invisibles from DMing. The rest of the segment went to its usual nature, securing Mist the best segment and a 52-second lead, which, as quoted by Mist, had a sub 249 potential if the rest of the run went perfectly. Chernobog went smoothly, with his only mistake being a DM by an invisible in the lab portal. Final Rest was very clutch, barely pulling off quick kill on Behemoth 3 in time. Mist still held his 55-second lead entering final fights. In Ansem 1, there are two openings Ansem can choose to do. One is he moves towards you and has his Guardian attempt to attack you, or option 2, Ansem throws discs. At this point in history, runners preferred the first option, as it was easier to control and dictate Ansem's movements in the fight. Mist sadly got the disc phase, and missed the deflection, making it difficult to chase down and dish out efficient damage on Ansem. Whilst chasing Ansem down, Mist pushed Ansem into areas of the arena which does not favour the player, due to the awkward slopes and heights. This would cost Mist 23 seconds, and cut his lead down almost in half. Luckily, Mist had 24 seconds worth of time save in the next segment due to missing DM skip in his last PB. But sadly, Mist would once again miss out on DM skip, but still saved 5 seconds. His World of Chaos started poorly, with a rough Ansem 3 and artillery, adding pressure which was already overflowing at this point. His nerves were showing in the phase fight, falling off twice and almost losing the run. Entering the Portal of Darkness, Mist was begging for a DMless Invisibles, as this fight could turn any run around. On November 8th, 2014, history would be made before us, witnessing a runner who has time and time again proven why he stands at the top, making history not once, but now twice. This is Mistmaster 1, completing Kingdom Hearts Final Mix in 2 hours, 49 minutes, and 36 seconds.
1.5? You have made a fool of me for the last time, because we got 249.36! Yes! You! Yes!
This would be the closing act of the second chapter, ending the Staff Night route, with only one runner ever achieving the sub 250 with this route. This chapter in history is what inspired many runners to give the game a try, feeling inspired watching two iconic runners trade world records back and forth over 2014, setting incredible feats in the process. But just as Mist would finally settle on his accomplishments, a new route would be not far away, which would change the game into what it's known as today.
Up to this point in the video, I have not gone heavily into detail on the importance of Divine Rose, and why players will go out of their way to watch an unskippable cutscene just for a Keyblade. Divine Rose is very powerful, and definitely the best Keyblade a runner can acquire in a scenario such as any percent. However, the idea of skipping Divine Rose has been tested and tried many times throughout 2014. Witnessing this route in the semi-finals of the first ever Kingdom Hearts Final Mix tournament, where Sonic was able to overtake Cyber and win the race by skipping all the requirements a runner would normally go through to acquire the Keyblade. The route was tried and tested a few more times after Sonic's success, possibly leaning on the idea that we were always wasting time by acquiring the Keyblade. But the results came back negative for skipping Divine Rose, as the damage you would deal on Heartless in the final two worlds was not enough to make the route quicker. In February of 2014, Sonic posted a video to the forum page of the pre-existing Kingdom Hearts speedrun website, where he showcased a strategy with Dumbo, allowing you to grab a higher platform to the Grand Chapel, which would then skip traversing to high towers, fighting the Heartless, exiting and re-entering the room, then activating the switch to move around. Several route ideas were tested implementing Dumbo into the route, but the time spent collecting Watergleam and also unlocking the summon from the Fairy Godmother was too much time wasted. This would change when Bloody Biscuits uploaded a video in March of 2015, showcasing a route comparison which would implement Dumbo skip in the Castle Gates area. By using Dumbo to reach the edge of the arch, the player is then able to fly straight to the lift without spawning Heartless. This movement tech would save enough time to make skipping Divine Rose and collecting Watergleam worth it, saving 1 minute and 40 seconds in movement compared to the old route. Another discovery made was that Dawn route was the quickest EXP route to use at any percent. It was previously believed Night route was the best choice, as a runner would achieve a higher level by the end of the game. But what was not originally considered was the buff stats you would have earlier in the run, which would benefit the player when it mattered. As well, with the discovery of damage caps in boss fights, it was proven that the additional levels did not benefit in many fights. With all this in mind, Myst returned to KHFM right away, learning the new route and mastering Dumbo movement, as well as the combat now without Divine Rose. On March 24th, Myst would see his first improvement on his world record. With this run only saving 5 seconds, the execution was not quite as good as his last run. However, one main highlight about this run is the introduction of Zetrus Jump. Named after the founder, Zetrus discovered you were able to dodge roll up a wedged wall in the mouth area of Monstro, which elevates you high enough to jump and reach the ledge above, saving 5 seconds. 2 days later, Myst lowered his time further, improving on combat slightly, however still struggling in the endgame with Oathkeeper now being used. Just 4 days later, Myst would have a run which would near replicate the execution once seen in his first sub 250 run, now with the new route adapted. This route would see some new enhancements to some strats and movement, with the first change coming in the pre-guard armor fight, where a specific order is used to defeat each soldier. With the inclusion of mashing the triangle button, this fight becomes much quicker and more consistent. The next change would be in the Hippo Lagoon, where Myst would skip traversing through the area by instead climbing up the vine to the Swinging Vines area, starting a minigame, then exiting right away, which would spawn Sora at the end of the minigame, exactly where the runner needs to be to progress to the next area. This strategy would save the player 6 seconds overall. Entering endgame, Myst was now 25 seconds ahead of his PB, and on pace for sub 249. As spoken about before, Myst had a very rough endgame in his last run, so Myst was close to the possibility of sub 248. His endgame would go very well, executing all 3 Dumbo skips without fail, and having excellent fights throughout endgame, with his Anthems 1 and 2 being the highlight of his run. Myst would complete this run exactly on 248 on March 30th, 2015, achieving the final world record ever done in English, which, like many achievements before, would be something that would stick with Myst's legacy forever. After achieving such an amazing run, Myst was ready to once again move on to other speedrunning projects and categories, feeling satisfied with his time and comfortable with his lead over the rest of the competition. During March of 2015, Bloody Biscuits, aka BB for short, took quite a strong interest in KHFM after discovering Dumbo Route and wondering whether the influence he applied to KH2 could also be applied to KH1. BB would start grinding the game and improving his skills over time, using a unique method to practice by using an emulator and cheat engine to delve into the hex code of the game and have a better understanding as to why certain things happen in fights. The approach BB had developed the speedrun into a much more consistent run, developing many of the strategies still used today. All of BB's efforts would pay off on June 9th, where Myst would finally be dethroned from his 12-month reign of the game, with BB achieving a 247.47. The main point to speak of is that the new world record finally returns to the Japanese port of the game. Ironically, when the English port was released, no one bothered to test and figure out the difference in speed, playing on Japanese versus English. This would all change in 2015, where runners got curious and started testing the older port to discover that it saves 1 minute due to faster text scroll. However, with the new 1 minute advantage and preferable controls, many top level runners invested in a Japanese copy, and all further runs were then done in Japanese. 2 weeks later, BB would lower his time down 20 seconds, primarily improving on execution errors shown on the last run, such as Riku 2 DM skip. Unsatisfied with the quality of his last run, BB wanted to improve on the mistakes made in the early and mid game and secure a competitive time which would stand above all the others he has achieved before. BB would achieve this goal on March 27th, finishing his KHFM legacy with an incredible run. Although not perfect, BB would save 20 seconds over his previously rough early and mid game. Endgame would be the beginning of an incredible string of segments, saving 20 seconds in Hollow Bastion 1, and increasing his lead to 40 seconds entering the final world. Sub 244 was almost a possibility for this run, but as already discussed throughout the community, would require near-perfect execution through the entirety of the game. As his end of the world progressed, his lead kept growing and reached its peak at 50 seconds, which baffled everyone seeing how close BB was to 243. As he progressed through the final fights, his lead diminished, having to compete with near-perfect segments all the way to the end. Bloody Biscuits would finish his legacy with an amazing time of 2:44.37, showcasing a truly remarkable run of the game, improving the time over 3 minutes, and introducing a new route and a bag full of new strats, which is all credited to his detail to attention when practicing and labbing the game. On October 27, 2016, it was announced that Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 Remix would be releasing on the 9th of March 2017 in Japan, and the 28th of March everywhere else in the world. With the game only 2 days away, a familiar face would return to bestow his legacy as the best player on the PS3 port. On March 7, 2017, Myst would reclaim world record after almost a year since his last world record. In terms of development, the run mostly plays out the same, with a change being implemented in Save Aladdin, now using blizzards rather than Simba, which would save 10 to 15 seconds on average, and remove the risk of crashing in the segment. Myst's run started out well, saving 20 seconds on BB in early game, with most of the time coming from the first 3 worlds. Myst's lead would continuously grow, saving 15 more seconds on BB by the end of Monstro. The momentum would suddenly end in the next world, with BB saving back 16 seconds on Myst due to smoother boss battles. Myst would not take long at all, recovering his losses from before, now with a 37-second lead at the end of mid-game. Excluding Riku 1, all of Myst's fights in both of the Hollow Bastion visits would go perfectly, now with a 57-second lead on his personal best, which now had him on a 2:43 pace entering the final world. With the DM-less Invisibles fight out of the way, one of the bigger hurdles was now passed in the run. Myst would continue through End of the World, making great progress now with over a minute lead on his PB. He would finish the world off with a rough segment in Final Rest, costing him roughly 20 seconds due to an invisible DM, which can be blamed on Goofy running away from the party charging at the Invisibles. Still with time save left on his PB, the possibility of 2:43 was still very much alive after a well-recovered Anthem 1. Myst would also secure the DM skip on Anthem 2 and have sub 2:44 set on his mind. As anxious as any runner would be, Myst was pressured with a run with never before seen potential. He played World of Chaos to his usual standard, bleeding minimal time and maintaining his 1 minute lead on PB. The final hurdle was before Myst, requiring a DM-less Portal of Darkness to secure 2:43. Similar to Final Rest, the party members would once again ruin this fight by charging away from Sora and creating an unwanted spread which made it difficult for Myst to clear all the enemies without any DMing. This very incident would cost Myst just enough time to barely miss sub 2:44, being only half a second off the target. Regardless of the time loss in both Final Rest and Anthem 4, Myst was very satisfied with his time, as it was a big improvement on BB's world record, considering how optimal the category was by this point. Myst had come very close to pushing the maximum potential at the time, quoting that 2:43 is of course possible, however due to PS4 release, Myst was satisfied with leaving his legacy there. The PS4 port would release 2 days later, with the story continuing on. But before we jump into the next chapter of the video, we need to discuss one last world record for this port. A familiar runner in the community was grinding away at his favourite port of the game after spending his last few years running the PS4 port. The PC port was releasing on this exact day, and this runner's goal was to claim his most desired speedrun goal of being the world record holder of the game that started his whole speedrun career, who ironically is the creator of this video. After taking time away from the PS4 port of the game, Saiyanz would return for a short period of time in late 2020, testing out the PS4 port on their newly released PS5. Although enjoying running the game again, the interest wasn't quite where he wanted it to be, as he felt satisfied with everything he had achieved on the PS4 port and was desiring his original goal of being the world record holder on PS3, which dates back many years, coming close on many attempts. After reclaiming PS2 world record for KHFM, Saiyanz now had his eyes set on the PS3 port, ready to start his grind at the beginning of February. On March 28, 2021, Saiyanz's grind would come to an end, achieving his dream goal and achieving the first ever sub 244 on PS3. Adapting to new tech which was discovered during the PS4 era, Saiyanz was able to utilize new discoveries found and made the 243 a reality. This of course was not a run Saiyanz was fully satisfied with, quoting he could see himself achieving a 242. Of course, with PC releasing later that day, and spending every day over the last 2 months grinding, he was satisfied enough to move on to other projects.
Now going back 5 years, we arrive at the release of the PS4 port of the Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 remix. This port was an upgrade on the former PS3 port, making plenty of quality of life improvements to the game. Better graphics, faster loads, plenty of bug fixes, and the biggest change being double the frame rate, with the game now constantly running at 60 frames per second. With faster loads meant new possible route changes to the way we traverse worlds, such as Traverse Town and Deep Jungle. And double the frame rate meant smoother animations and more responsive input registry, allowing runners to optimize fights further than ever seen before on the PS3 port. We briefly start our story on the release of the game, with Norego technically completing the first full run of the port, achieving a 3:03:38. Only hours later, Mist would complete his first run of the game, achieving a 2:17:28. This run showcased that the game saved roughly over 30 minutes, which made running the game less time constraining and more enjoyable for new players, as it breathed fresh life into the game once again. 11 days later, I would achieve my first ever world record in any percent beginner, with a 2:16:15. Majority of the improvement on world record came in early game, saving 1 minute and 6 seconds due to better execution. This run would also showcase how the improved loads could be utilised in the route. On PS3, a player would enter Traverse Town, head to Leon in the Secret Waterway, return to Sid the Accessory Shop, then advance to Merlin's house. This new route was heavily inspired from the English route of the PS3 port, which I have not delved into yet, as no world records were further achieved on English past Miss 248. But to briefly cover the new route, a user known as Korzak uploaded a video in January of 2016, showcasing himself clipping through the gates of the Secret Waterway, which usually can only be broken with a red trinity, which is unlocked after completing early game. By completing guard armor, then proceeding to do the clip, talking to Leon, then afterwards entering Merlin's house before leaving, this skips a lot of unnecessary movement between areas, and allows the player to save warp specifically to and from the checkpoints of the second visit. Being that this clip was exclusive to the English port only, what is then done instead is heading to Leon, then Merlin's, then save warp into the accessory shop, then back to Merlin's to complete all the checkpoints of the second visit, saving roughly 12 seconds. Miss would come back swinging 2 days later, with a 5-second improvement on myself. Almost breaking 2 barriers in one run, Miss would push his time down further, coming close to sub 2:15, falling only 2 seconds short. On April 24th, Miss would conduct a race with some community members, aiming to get some good practice in by forcing himself to play through the whole game without resetting. Similar to his run where he raced Mysora, I imagine he was not expecting to achieve such a major improvement, securing a time of a 2:14:25, and feeling satisfied with his overall time and ready to move on to All Worlds. One change to speak on quickly is the use of save warping in Deep Jungle, to reach the swinging vines area quicker, saving 4 seconds. Miss was stating a clear dominance on the new port, with only one runner opposing him so far. This would all change on September 4th, 2017, when the world record holder of Kingdom Hearts 2 English would triumphantly acquire his first world record in KHFM, beating Miss by 19 seconds. And his name was Ninten. Comparing the two, we see Ninten already saving time on Miss by 15 seconds in the early game. In the mid-game, Miss would save back 15 seconds in Agrabah, however, Ninten would save back 10 seconds on Miss by successfully pulling off Chamber 3 skip. To quickly explain, Chamber 3 skip is a unique jump performed in Chamber 2, which allows the player to skip traversing through the bottom area of Chamber 2 and as well as Chamber 3. This is done by precisely timing a Keyblade swing to push you up the edge of the door frame, then jumping at a very tight angle, which if performed correctly, just barely allows you to grab the ledge of the higher pathway, allowing you to skip the chambers explained earlier. This movement saves roughly 7 seconds. Ninten would continue his momentum in Halloween Town, saving another 20 seconds on Mist, now with a 30-second lead at the halfway mark. Jumping further ahead, Ninten's lead would continue to grow, seeing a 50-second lead on Mist entering the final world. Ninten's end of the world would go smooth enough to keep a 47-second lead on world record heading into Homecoming. Mist's final fights would go a little smoother than Ninten's, but it would not stop Ninten from securing his first world record in KH1, with an incredible improvement on his PB and etching himself into the history of the game. Ninten would improve his time once more, achieving the first ever sub 2:14, mainly improving in final fights, which was the main rough patch of his last run. The King of Cage 1 would return in early December, eyeing the new competition off. Miss would quickly reclaim world record on December 6, 2017. The run played out very similar to Ninten's, edging the world record due to better final fights. During the research of the video, I discovered that Miss improved his time an additional 7 seconds later that same night. Due to the improvement being so small and sudden, I imagine Miss either forgot or was not interested in highlighting this run. All of this would be due to the run Miss acquired on the very next day, achieving his third world record improvement in 2 days, bringing his time down by 30 seconds, thanks to one of his best ever endgames, saving all of his time in final fights. Being only 7 seconds short of sub 213, Miss was persisting on this goal and hoping to acquire it before the end of the year. On December 21st, Miss' goal would be achieved with a 2:12.58. Miss saved a massive portion of time throughout early and mid-game, creating a 46-second lead entering the final world. But as spoken just before, Miss was competing against one of his best ever final fights, and would unfortunately bleed time in Anthems 1 and 3. Anthem 1 would move into an awkward corner of the arena, and in Anthem 3, Miss failed to take a lot of his attacks, needing to waste more time healing. I would return to KHFM in July, setting my eyes on world record, and successfully achieving my goal on August 8th with a 2:12.48. I don't believe it is necessary to talk about this particular run in great detail, other than a few portions of the run. Firstly, I would like to point out a new strategy being used in the Trickmaster fight, which consisted of the use of precise air hits instead of using the chair. This new strat made the fight a lot faster and more consistent. The second change would be the movement in Traverse Town 4. Instead of activating a red trinity and traversing through the alleyway, instead I head back to the accessories shop and warp to Merlin's house, then ask Merlin to send me to the secret waterway, which saves 3 seconds. The new world record I set would spark Miss to return from his 8-month hiatus, feeling reinvigorated and eager to see how low he could push the game down. This 2-month grind would see the highest volume of world records from any player in history, achieving 12 world records in total. After achieving 12 world records in 6 weeks, Miss was feeling burnt out and needed some time away from the category. He would return on January 3rd, aiming for sub 210 before the release of Kingdom Hearts 3. After a week of derusting, Miss' first improvement would come on January 10th, pushing his time down by another 2 seconds. With almost no time left to spare, Miss was technically on pace for sub 211 in the final segment, but he would require close to a best segment for this to happen. Although his invisibles went smooth, they were not optimal enough to achieve the goal. The day would finally arrive on January 11th, where Miss would finally achieve his goal of sub 211. This run played out similar to his last run, trailing behind by 10 to 15 seconds. This all changed after completing the Behemoth segment, where he was able to save back a massive chunk of time and be green for the first time since early game. Keeping his composure and churning through each fight, Miss was able to withhold a good lead entering final fights. Maintaining a strong enough lead, Miss secured sub 211 and was able to finish his any % beginner journey feeling satisfied and ready to move on. With Miss now done with beginner mode, the question was out there as to who the next player would be to take over from Miss and continue pushing the game down. At the time, there were many runners who had massive potential with the game, but one player stood out from the rest, showcasing ridiculous consistency and optimization never seen before, and his name was Templeton. If we quickly return to October 9th, 2018, Templeton completed his last run of the year, achieving a time of a 2:11.13. This was the run that showcased to the community Templeton's potential, and how close he was at overtaking Mist, falling short of world record by only 6 seconds. Spending the first few months working on alternative categories, Templeton would return to beginner mode in May, quickly achieving a 2:11.02 on May 2nd, and only 2 days later would Templeton be crowned as the top runner, achieving his first world record with this run. Right away we would see Templeton's incredible ability at optimizing small intricacies in the game, creating a 40-second lead on world record by the end of Deep Jungle, which is quite insane considering how simple the execution is in early game. Progressing further ahead, we arrive at the midway mark of the game, being Monstro, and Templeton would achieve the first ever sub-1 Monstro, which is a feat which would not be matched for a long time. With this achievement in mind, Templeton was now 1 minute and 17 seconds out of world record. The lead would not grow any further in the second half, as this is where Miss is known to shine, always bringing with him amazing endgames. Templeton's next world record would not happen for almost 2 months, achieving a 2:10.21 on June 26. Another historic world record would be achieved on June 29th, which is considered by many as one of the greatest world records in KHFM's history. Templeton's early game started off well, matching his already excellent early game. His mid-game went well with a smooth Agrabah and Monstro. After discovering Hook Ship, Templeton would have an outstanding Neverland, saving 13 seconds with the only mistake being Annie-Sora breaking out of the loop. Templeton had big potential for time save in Travis Town 3, since he unfortunately got the bad pattern in his last run. He would be fortunate enough to acquire the good pattern and also get the quick kill at the end. But due to wasting time chasing down one of the foot pieces, Templeton would miss out on time save. Hollow Bash went smoothly, saving 4 seconds on his PB, with now a 21-second lead, which had him close to sub 209 pace. With a rough lift fight, Templeton would lose 8 seconds to his PB, putting a lot of pressure for Templeton to perform well in the final world to make this goal happen. With one of the worst spreads I've ever seen, Templeton miraculously got DMless Invisibles, however lost a ton of time chasing down each enemy. Continuing on from that rough segment, Templeton would have an awesome Chernobog with the best Invisibles I've ever seen in the laboratory. After the completion of Final Rest, Templeton's best possible time was a 2:09.52, which in short means Templeton has to play no more than 7 seconds slower than his best segment to achieve a sub 2:10. Since Templeton uses world splits instead of traditional splits, his best possible time is less intimidating to look at, as it's not considering as many segments. You will notice Templeton doing a specific amount of hits after flinching Ansem, then moving away. This is intentionally done to manipulate the AI to retaliate with the shortest attack, which then allows the player to continuously loop Ansem in the corner, dealing out efficient damage. This strategy does not commonly last the entire fight, however Templeton did such a great job that he got a flawless fight. With 2 of the hardest fights down, and all the potential in the world to make history, Templeton was ready to go. His Ansem 3 and Shadow's Call was a little bit rough, but luckily he was able to get the cutscene skip after Ansem 3. To quickly explain, by falling off a surface in the location where the loading trigger spawns in, moments before the cutscene plays, you are able to enter into the Shadow's Call whilst avoiding the post-Ansem 3 cutscene. After the artillery fight, Templeton barely made it through the loading zone with an elixir, which meant he now had maximum MP right away in the Dark Ballroom. He would first do an empty swing, then proceed to summon fire, which animates quicker compared to the neutral stance. After a smooth fight, it all came down to the Portal of Darkness, to decide the fate of sub 210. The Invisibles awkwardly approached the party, but fortunately Donald and Goofy stayed with Sora, so Templeton was eventually able to achieve DMless Invisibles, only costing a small amount of time. Ansem 4 started off perfect, breaching midway through Ansem's yellow bar before being pushed back, which is close to maximum damage output a player can do at this point in the fight. After returning to Ansem and dishing out efficient damage, Templeton had done it. On June 29th, Templeton was the first player to breach the sub 210 hurdle and would achieve a time that was not topped for 18 more months, which stood as the longest reigning world record of an active category.
27-second PB. Oh my god.
18 months would pass since Templeton's incredible 209 run, before a new face would etch himself at the top of the leaderboards, going by the name of Violin. When speaking earlier about a group of runners who all had great potential to go on and be the new face of the game, Violin was one of those contenders, who would improve his time by over 6 minutes after the departure of Mist, showcasing rapid improvement and great potential. When returning to 80% beginner in June, Violin had his eyes set on sub 210 over the coming months. He would improve his time down 5 more times before achieving the second ever sub 210, falling short of world record by 3 seconds. The PlayStation 5 would release on November 12, which brought with it backwards compatibility for all PS4 titles. This would benefit the KHFM speedrun, as the console had improved hardware which improved the loads by a decent amount of time, being roughly quoted as 30 seconds to a minute faster. After it was decided that PS5 would stay merged with PS4, Violin saw no further reason to continue on slower hardware, and continued his grind on the new console, achieving his first world record on November 13th of a 209.46, which was still an incredible run, regardless of the new hardware benefits. Starting the second week of 2021, Violin would improve his time down by 20 seconds, mostly improving his time save in endgame, specifically in Behemoth and Anthem 3. Although happy with the improvement, Violin's eyes were set on sub 209. With 208 in his sights, Violin would continuously grind every day after his PB, finally breaking through on January 12th with the first ever 208. Violin's gameplay improved on all ends, seeing good time save in the mid game with Monstro and Neverland being his standout worlds. His endgame went great, excluding Behemoth and Chernobog. He would go on to have an amazing set of final fights and clutch out the final world record on the sport with a 208.52. On March 30th, 2021, Kingdom Hearts would finally arrive on the PC, exclusively on the Epic Games Store. This was an exciting time for the community, as the release of the PS5 console disencouraged people from wanting to go for a competitive time in the game, as acquiring the console was very difficult and costly. With the PC port now released, Detonator was able to make the community a load remover, which is a component attached to a player's timer, which will pause the timer whenever it detects a load. This meant that all players were able to compete on an even playing field, regardless of how good or bad their hardware was. Another interesting fact about this port is it's built off the previously made Xbox port. The Xbox port was technically the fastest port before PC's release, as it allows you to skip the opening cutscene, saving 3 minutes and 15 seconds. However, the Xbox port was not very popular, as many players did not own the console, as well the game suffered with controller dead zone issues. Another weird anomaly about this port is one of the early cutscenes in Wonderland is now unskippable, which loses a few seconds to the PS4 port. The first set of world records did not have a loadless timer, so I'll quickly show on screen the world records that were achieved on the first week of the game's release. With that now out of the way, let's start with the first world record done with a load remover, which was technically slower than the RTA timing method, but still counts since the community had decided that they would rank runs based off loadless times. Templeton would be the first person to complete a run with the newly developed load remover, and achieve the time of a 151.21. In translation to our previous method of timing, this is roughly a 207.28. Although 28 seconds slower than the former RTA world record, this run is still a great start, showcasing how much time is spent in load screens on the fastest port. Violin would be the person to continue pushing his time down over the next 6 months, desiring to be the next person in history to break the time barrier of sub 150. Let's showcase his results. Violin would miss the mark by half a second. Half a second! After falling short by 7 seconds, 2 seconds, now half a second, the grind was clearly testing Violin and pushing him to levels he had never been to before. But after coming so close, so many times, would he ever get that chance again? Looking back over the last 10 years, we have seen a community come together and transform this game into what it is today. From humble beginnings to now a fully developed speed game, the many great innovators who came before have created a wonderful story I have greatly enjoyed telling. We arrive at the grand finale, the last world record I'll be speaking about, which goes down as one of the greatest runs ever performed, which resembles barriers broken similar to Miss Sub 3 and Templeton's Sub 210. On October 13th, 2021, Violin would complete the long journey of this game's history, with possibly one of the last big time hurdles complete, acquiring a 149.40, the first ever sub 150 and the only sub 150 as of the time of this recording. All credit to Violin for not giving up on his goal, regardless of how close he came in his last set of PBs, proving if you persist and stay positive, it will all work out.
Every time I hear a wedding bell ring, girl, it reminds me that you're gone, baby. And just about the time I think I'm over you, girl, ooh, another bell will tone. And memories of all the foolish things I've said. So please stop the bell. You got the power, baby. I don't wanna hear them anymore. The pain, the pain. Stop the bell. I don't wanna hear them anymore. Whoa, 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 please stop, baby. Left me, ooh, the pain and misery, oh. And every time I see you with him, baby, oh girl, how I wish that it was me. But the way listen, I don't